Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Fran Costigan, the Director of Vegan Pastry at the Rouxbe Online Culinary School, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the April Live event. I'm very excited to be doing this. I missed March, and this is really, the live events are a highlight of my month, that's for sure. I want to thank people in advance who sent questions, and they're very interesting questions. I had a chance to look at some of them. And remember that you can still send in your question just on the right side of your screen. There's a place where it says add question here. You can just add it, and I'm going to get to as many questions as possible today. I do want to go over a couple of things before I dive into the topic, which is really quite interesting to me. I just redid my kitchen. In fact, I'll be moving back in tomorrow. And this was a much delayed situation because of COVID and other things. And so I had, did some research on ovens. Ovens are clearly interesting to me and important because I bake. And I learned a lot, and I want to share that information with you. There is an event document listed for you that you can grab on the page. It says event doc, and there's some of the information that I'm giving today. And I also have a cornbread and corn muffin recipe for you that you're welcome to enjoy. In the Q&A, you'll find another place to get the cornbread recipe and some options for oven thermometers. And I'm going to tell you why I think they're important. I want to welcome guests, graduates of Rouxbe programs, and my Essential Vegan Desserts students. Well, I have several new students recently, and I want to remind everyone who is in Essential Vegan Desserts to join the Facebook group, the private Facebook group. If you're on Facebook, it's a great place to ask questions of your colleagues. You want a new mixer maybe, or a piece of equipment. This is a great place to ask people what their experience with particular brands have been. Also share your work there. It's a wonderful thing to do. I'm in the group often. I find it really fun to be in that group. For questions of a technical nature, just write to support@rouxbe.com, and someone from our wonderful team will get back to you very quickly, very quickly. So I'm happy that you're here. The links are here, as I said, and let's get to the topic, which is working with your oven from burnt to beautiful. Well, we hope things aren't burnt, but beautiful is good, and sometimes good enough is good enough. So ovens come in a variety of shapes and sizes and types, but at the core of all oven technology is the ability to generate heat. There are several types of ovens. Each type has its own unique advantages and some disadvantages. Now, it's important to remember that each, no matter what you have, even the most luxurious luxe ovens, you can count on it not being in perfect calibration, and it might not even be close to the temperature you set. I know I've had a number of different ovens during my lifetime. I've had wall ovens, and now I have the slide-in oven. I've had gas, I've had electric, I've had convection, and I can tell you that calibration is something that's important. In other words, you want 350, you set the dial, or however you do it. My new oven, I can actually talk to my phone and tell it to preheat. That's another story. And it isn't at 350 after it has fully preheated. So you learn to adjust the dial. If things are really awful, you can call a repairman. And I know the newer ovens have self-calibration options available, but that's really important to know. The most common types of ovens are gas. An advantage of a gas oven is that it does heat more quickly to temperature, but they are more prone to hot spots, and they also hold humidity. They also hold humidity. I think in my research, gas was the most common type of oven that people had, although it is falling, let me say, falling out of favor today for eco reasons. We can talk about that. Electric ovens, are slower to heat, but they do give you a more even bake and a more consistent bake. So at one time, I had a dual fuel range, which was gas on the top and an electric oven. Now I have a fully electric oven. Electric ovens come two ways. One is static heat, which means there's no fan. It's just a static heating. And the newer version, or newer home version, because bakeries and restaurants have had convection ovens for a really long time. Convection oven is an electric oven. Maybe there, I don't think there is a gas convection oven, but an electric oven where there is a fan that circulates the heat, and it's supposed to be more even baking consistently and a faster baking situation. Now, I use convection mode on my new oven, and I've used convection ovens in my work as a pastry chef in restaurants and as a teacher in culinary schools. The commercial convection ovens are different from the home convection ovens. They are stronger, that's for sure. No matter what type of oven you have, though, remember the calibration. And how are you going to know what the temperature is? Well, allow enough time for your oven to preheat. It will not be at temperature when the oven tells you that it's at temperature by dinging, or you see the knob control that says 350, for example. It takes a much longer time. Now, if anyone here has had a different experience, I'd like to hear about that. But I have learned my ovens, and I really do allow 30 minutes for my oven to preheat. I mean, convince me otherwise if you have an oven that you preheat it 15 minutes before it dings and it's at 350. I don't think so. Use at least one reliable oven thermometer. There is a link in the on the page, on our page here, for the ones that I have. I have two oven thermometers in my in my oven at all time, and one in my countertop oven. And when I went to stay at my neighbor's apartment for the last 6 weeks, I was very lucky to be able to do that. And she's a chef. I brought my oven thermometer. So you want to reset your dial accordingly, and then you want to set your racks correctly according to what you are baking. And I'm going to talk about that a little later. Convection ovens come with directions to reduce the temperature and the time of your bake. Typically 25% is what we're told that the reduction in temperature should be, and time. But I can tell you from my own experience that it depends on the oven. Sometimes it's 25% lower temperature. It can be high. It's not higher, but it can be pretty close to the particular temperature. One of my convection ovens is almost like a super convection. It bakes beautifully, but for a 350 temperature instruction in my recipe, I will keep that at 340 Fahrenheit. And actually, Rose Baron Van Levy has the same oven, and she has confirmed for me that 340 is there. So you're going to want to check your bakes. Because the air in a convection oven is in constant motion, you're not going to want to bake meringues in the oven. They're going to deform. But you will probably find that your cakes rise a bit higher. I mean, I'm happy to have it. So my new oven, which is a GE Cafe with an electric radiant heat cooktop, and the oven has regular standard bake, convection bake, all this kind of stuff. In fact, I've got a little picture of it that Patrick can perhaps pull up for us to see. I had it installed before I moved out. The contractor wanted it there so that the countertops could be set right. And so I did bake with it a few times, and it bakes really, really evenly. The oven that it replaced had a convection mode setting, and it just never did anything. So again, I'm going to say this over and over again because it bears repeating. You really need to get to know your own ovens. If you do a lot of baking, it's can be very useful to map out the hot spots in your oven, because even an electric oven, which has, you have an electric oven, it gives you a consistent bake, there is still going to be some differences. So what I do with an oven or a new oven, and periodically with my oven, is I take a sheet pan and I put shredded coconut in one layer on the sheet pan on parchment, and I know what temperature I do coconut at, which is I do it low and slow. And you can see by moving, I'll do like a quarter sheet in different areas of my oven, and you can do it with breadcrumbs too. And that will give you an idea about where your hot spots are. So again, I'm just going to review here and then go on. You want to definitely make sure your oven is in calibration, meaning that it's going to give you the temperature that you need for your bake or roast or whatever. You're going to use an oven thermometer, hopefully, to know what the actual temperature is, and you're going to allow enough time for the oven to preheat. You're going to get to know your oven. And I, keep notes on your oven. You're going to set the baking racks where they should be. I like to bake pies on the lower rack because I want my pie dough the bottom of it to set quickly. For the same reason, I'm not going to bake cookies on the bottom rack. I don't want my cookie bottoms to burn. I do most of my baking on the center rack, all of my cakes on the center rack. If you bake a cake on a higher rack, it tends to dome, but you can use that information to bake cupcakes, because I like a nice dome on my cupcake. So I will bake it not on the top rack, but in the top third. So those are things that I think are really important for us to remember. Now let me get to some questions here. All right, so if you look at the question queue, you'll see the cornbread recipe is there and 2 options for oven thermometers. Okay, hi Sylvia. Sylvia has a question about oven thermometers. When using an oven thermometer to test for temperature accuracy, where is the best place to put it in the oven? Thanks. That's a good question, and one that many of my students have asked over time. I keep one on the close to the center of the center rack and one on the top, and that's where I keep them. That's where I keep them. Thanks, Sylvia, for that question. Jerry, hi, Jerry. Jerry needs guidance on convection versus bake. What determines the best approach to baking? Well, one answer is use what you have. I prefer, excuse me, I prefer using convection bake. I like the way my cakes rise, for example. I don't use it for everything. I don't use it for delicate cookies. And when I'm testing recipes for the general public, I bake in standard mode because not everyone has convection bake. But if you have the option of convection bake in your oven, definitely give it a try. And, I'm talking about test bake. So what I do, whether when I'm testing recipes or I'm testing my oven, is I make a smaller version of something, but maintain the amount of batter that would be in a pan and then bake it off. And that's how you know. I have also got, excuse me, a countertop oven made by Breville, and Patrick has a photo of that to show you as well. So, oh, I don't know. I've so lost a timeline, but I think it was during the lockdown. I had the opportunity to develop recipes for a company that I like very much. And I have one oven. There's no place in my apartment to put, two wall ovens. I had one oven. And so I decided to get this countertop oven. And I thought hard and long about it because I didn't have that much real estate to give up. Well, I love this oven. And this particular one does everything. I can dehydrate. When I make aquafaba meringues, I dehydrate them in that oven, meaning I bake them very slowly. The convection mode on that oven is sensational. And I have learned that that one has to be set at 340 Fahrenheit, not 325 for a 350 bake. Well, one day I baked 2 layers made from the same mixing bowl in the exact same pans of my chocolate cake to live for. One in the Breville, one in my on convection, one in my oven on convection, and I compared them. And that was very interesting. One baked faster than the other, and they both baked nicely. But I really love that oven. Now that I have a nicer oven, I'm sure I'll be using my other oven a little bit more than I was. Oh, this is an interesting question from Linda. Linda P. is asking, she says, I can only find whole grain versus whole wheat pasta. I understand that whole grain is not the better choice. Why? Well, actually, that's a very interesting question. Both whole grain and whole wheat contain all 3 parts of the grain kernel, the bran, the endosperm, and the germ. So that's a good thing. They're whole. Whole wheat exclusively refers to wheat kernels, while whole grain includes other grains. That's why it's called whole grain. So there might be barley, corn, rye, quinoa. The main difference between whole grain and whole wheat is the type of grain used. They are both whole and healthy, so you don't have to worry about it. I really think that is something that is confusing to people, and it's wonderful, Linda, that you are looking at labels. We all need to be looking at labels. Hi, Anne. So Anne says, I'm trying to be gluten-free, but the recipes I've tried and store-bought breads just have a weird taste and aftertaste to them. Same taste on all. This is something that can mix into the cookie dough. That's a big question, Anne. So the answer is that you need to learn how to bake gluten-free. There are some better gluten-free items on the market today. I know that. I am not gluten-free. My daughter-in-law is gluten-free, so I'm quite aware of that. When I bake gluten-free, I use Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1 all-purpose gluten-free flour, or baking flour. That's what it's called. And it's got a blue label, and it's very easy to find. It's complete, meaning it has some xanthan or guar gum in it. You just whisk it up. Personally, I find that that does the best bakes. Other people have used Cup for Cup and some other gluten-free baking flour mixes. But I'm sorry to tell you that it isn't as simple as just swapping out. Many people say, or you'll see recipes that say, oh, use 1/2 cup of whole wheat pastry flour, 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour. I'm going to use 1 cup of gluten-free flour. It takes more finessing than that to bake gluten-free. And we have gluten-free recipes that taste real, that deliver delicious tasting baked goods in the course. I'm really happy to say I worked really hard on doing that. But you know, another thing, Anne, is you're talking about gluten-free baked goods. There are many desserts that are naturally gluten-free. Oh, Tara, Chef Fran, not a question, but to share that I'm a graduate of the Natural Gourmet Institute in the 90s, and I remember taking a class with you. You were fantastic. I'm happy to hear you live again. Tara, thank you so much for that nice comment. Well, it's just always nice to hear from people. I've been teaching for well over 30 years, and I run into people, and it's just the nicest thing. The Natural Gourmet, I taught there for years. It was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place. Good to hear from you, Tara. Thank you. Roseanne has a question. Do gas ovens bake differently from electric ovens? Well, yes. In the document that is available to you here, I did write that while gas ovens heat faster, they do have more hot spots. But that's not the only reason. Electric ovens that are in a decent electric oven is going to give you a more consistently successful baked good. So if you're in the market for a new oven, that is something that you can do. All right, good luck. Joy has a question here. When following a cookie recipe and I make 2 cookie sheets, when the recipe calls for just 1, do I raise the oven temperature for having more in it? Or if using 2 racks in the oven instead of 1, is the top hotter? That's a good question, Joy. A lot of recipes will tell you to bake 1 tray of cookies at a time on this center rack. Because that's the best place for cookies to bake, unless the recipe is a reliable recipe and it says something else. The top rack is definitely hotter, and the bottom third of your oven, your cookies are going to burn. So I've made, I have some cookie recipes where I can stack the ovens this way, and that's another thing about convection ovens. Sometimes they come with 3 racks. Often they come with, 4 racks. 4 racks, or I've even seen some with 5, because you're supposed to be able to bake more at the same time. So Joy, maybe you bake 1 at a time. Sylvia has a comment about her gas oven. My gas oven has an option to be used as a regular oven or a convection oven. Are there advantages to using one over the other? Well, Sylvia, you're assuming that the convection mode works correctly, and that's something you're going to want to check out if you haven't already used it by doing a test bake. Then the convection bake is going to happen faster, and it's likely going to be higher. I mean, if we're talking about a cake, it might be a little bit loftier. So my choice is always to use the convection bake mode when it's available to you. So I'd like, you can let me know. You can write to me at fran@rouxbe.com and let me know how some of these situations work out for you. I'd love to know. And Joy has a question about bread. For following a recipe for bread, if I double the recipe, do I need to increase the oven temperature for that? If I'm using 2 racks instead of 1, are there specific concerns for the different loaves? Well, Joy, as I said earlier, the temperature differential between the top rack, the middle rack, the bottom rack is going to be different. And you can find out how different in your particular oven by putting thermometers in these different places. I don't know your particular oven. You shouldn't really need to increase the temperature of the bake, but I would say watch your breads carefully. And if they're taking too long, much longer than the recipe is indicating you might want to put the temperature up, but I wouldn't put it up too high. I wouldn't put it up too high. So good luck with that. Oh, Paula, this is interesting because one of my friends has been talking about this. Paula's new oven has a steam feature. What are some ways to use this besides steaming veggies? Well, breads will be great with your steam feature. I mean, anybody bake bread and throw ice cubes in their oven, or remember about putting a pan of water in the bottom of the oven? So that's something that should be really terrific. Paula, if you can tell us the name of your new oven with this feature, we'd love to know. Love to know. But steaming vegetables, I think you can make some nice bread, juicy fruit desserts. I think that sounds wonderful. Wonderful. Congratulations. Hi, Regina. It's good to see you. Regina helped me at, what was it called? It was a Plant-Based World Expo demo in New York City. And Regina is a graduate of Essential Vegan Desserts and has her own business now and was a great help. Can you pre-assemble and freeze baked Alaska, including the meringue topping? Would you just torch it for service? Yes, you can. I have done it many times. So for those of you who, if there's anybody here who doesn't know about the magic ingredient called aquafaba, aquafaba is chickpea cooking liquid. And treated properly, and we really go into this in Essential Vegan Desserts. In fact, I have a photo on my Instagram page now of a student's whisk just loaded with this gorgeous eggless meringue from chickpea liquid. If you, Good Cakes Fran on Instagram if you're interested in looking. So baked Alaska typically is some kind of a cake with ice cream. So we use a vegan cake, oftentimes a gluten-free vegan cake because the ice cream is gluten-free and the meringue is gluten-free. So it's cake, maybe a sauce, chocolate sauce or a fruit sauce, ice cream, and then beautiful, beautiful meringue, which is torched, toasted, tastes like marshmallow fluff, and served, and everybody screams. No one can believe they can still have it. Well, you can definitely put them completely, partially, or completely assembled in the freezer. I've done it many times, and then torch right before serving. So this is a dessert that really looks like a party dessert, and yet it's quite easy. Remember, component desserts, meaning putting things together as you need them, is the way to go. So good luck with that, Regina. Sylvia says, I once baked banana bread from a pre-mixed package following directions using a loaf pan, and it sagged in the middle. What could have gone wrong? Oh my gosh, so many things could have gone wrong. It might have been the mix. Not every mix that we buy really is good. Some are better than others. I haven't used a mix in a while. I'm not denigrating anybody who does, but I make my own mixes now. It might have been the mix. It might have been your oven, maybe your loaf pan. If it sagged in the middle, it's likely that the batter was too high, too much batter for the size of your loaf pan. Very occasionally, or more often when I'm testing recipes, I'll get a bake that looks really nice except for the middle, and the middle didn't bake and sag a little. Oftentimes you can just let the cake cool, cut out the part that isn't so good, and serve it proudly. But that's all I can think of, Sylvie, is that the particular mix was deficient, or you didn't measure the liquid ingredients properly, or your loaf pan was too small for the amount of batter, or your oven wasn't at temperature. Anita wants to know, is it safe to use a stainless steel baking sheet for cookies? Absolutely, absolutely. And I put parchment paper in all of my cake pans and on my cookie sheets for quick release, but stainless steel is great. Stainless steel is great. Barbara also has a regular gas oven with convection options. So that's terrific. Barbara, have you used it? Have you used it? I think anybody who's lucky enough to have convection mode ought to give it a whirl. Let's see. Diane says, my oven is 20 years old and the door keeps falling off. I'm planning on getting a new one. It has to be electric and can be small. I'm intrigued with the countertop ovens that have convection dehydrate. What do you think about, what should I think about before buying? Well, Diane, I couldn't be happier with my Breville countertop convection oven. I think Patrick showed a photo of it earlier. It's just great. You can write to me and I will send you a link to the particular one that I have. I can get 2 8-inch cake pans in there. I can get a quarter sheet pan, you know, for a sheet cake. I use it mostly for baking. It does dehydrate nicely. Air fry, you know, air fry is just, what can I say? It's just convection bake on steroids. It's just a very high convection bake. And what else does it do? It does a ton of stuff. You know, I haven't seen my things in a while, so I don't remember, but I use it all the time. I really, really, really like it. So, you know, give it a try, Diane. I know there are other brands, but I've talked to several people who have this particular one, and it's really great. Hi, Belissa. I've been enjoying grading your assignments. Belissa's asking, what settings do you use when you dry meringue cookies in your Breville countertop oven? I either have the temperature at 225 and sometimes I just dehydrate them overnight, because what you're doing with meringues is you're only drying them out. You're not really baking them. So that's what I do. That's what I do. Hi, David. David is asking, when using a convection oven, is it still necessary? This is a great question. To rotate and or move multiple pans, top to bottom, trays, does the convection even temperatures out sufficiently? I rotate, but wonder whether I really need to. And it loses, well, it does, you know, any oven, the more you open the door, you're going to lose heat. So David has an important point there. You know, it depends on what you're baking and it depends on your particular oven. Convection mode is supposed to be the most even of all. I still rotate sometime because no matter what, try the coconut test and you will see that there are some hot spots in your oven. So David, why don't you bake something and do it without rotating and see how that works out for you. Cynthia says, I'm new, so excuse my ignorance. Well, you know what we say, there is no such thing as a question that someone else didn't have. Would you explain more about guar gum and its relation to whole food plant-based diets? Is it overly processed and natural? I've read it's a natural food and possibly good for you. That's a big question and an important one. So guar gum is really from a natural source, but it has been processed. Most of our foods have been processed. Some people cannot tolerate gums at all. They cannot tolerate gums at all. And if you're that person, you're going to know it from the way you feel. It is used, guar and xanthan are used in gluten-free baking because it helps to bind these non-wheat flours. And it's important. I have never heard that it's been promoted in whole food plant-based diets. This is news to me, let's say. Whole food plant-based diets mean whole foods that are plant-based and oftentimes no oil, no sugar or very limited amounts of oil and very limited amounts of sugar. I don't say that guar is a food we shouldn't be using. I do use it, and you use it in teeny tiny quantities, and you want to keep that in your refrigerator as well. And guar and xanthan are pretty much interchangeable, but I have never heard anyone say that it's good for you in a way that some others are good for you. Cynthia, I'd like to know more about that. I would. Barbara wants to know what brand of air fryer is best. I don't know. I had a countertop one at one point. So I'm a one person household, except when I have friends in. And I did use it. It was a handy thing to use instead of heating up my big oven. This was before I had my Breville. And again, I say that an air fryer is really just a convection oven on steroids. So I loved to crisp tofu, cook tofu in it, all kinds of vegetables and so on. There are so many air fryers on the market. I think if you're a Rouxbe student, that's a good question to ask in the Facebook group. Otherwise, go online and read reviews that are real reviews and see what you can do about that. Um, and and let people know, let us know what you think. Thank you for the question. Anita has a question. Should I increase the oven temperature and baking time if I bake 3 cakes at the same time? Well, if you're baking 3 cakes at the same time in the same oven, I'm assuming that you've got 2 on the center rack and 1 higher. I haven't had to do that with my bakes, but again, that's something for your oven. You might want to increase it maybe by 15 degrees, but I wouldn't do more than that if your oven is well insulated. And that's a situation where, you're going to just have to find out. I'm suggesting to people that they do test bakes, but actually, if you want to know how that works, I don't know. I mean, common sense would say increase the temperature a little bit. And the baking time, you just have to keep an eye on things. No matter what, being present in your oven when you are baking, when you are roasting nuts, for example, I don't leave the kitchen. Once I start smelling the fragrance and I'm in another room, I know that the nuts or the coconut or the seeds are burnt. So we really want to pay attention to our work. When you're testing your ovens, when you're getting to know your ovens, whether they're new or old, you can reacquaint yourself with your oven. I keep notes on my ovens. I think that's a really important thing. Recipes that I like, I have notes. This took this much time to bake. I make adjustments, or a larger pan. This took this much time to bake. And I suggest that everyone do that. Now, before I say goodbye, I have 2 more photos that I'm going to ask Patrick to show. One is called an AGA, A-G-A. And if there is anyone here who's across the pond somewhere, they're probably more familiar with the AGA oven than in the United States. But there is now AGA US. When I taught at the Natural Gourmet Institute in New York City, when the school was founded in the original location on 23rd Street, there was an AGA. So an AGA is a cast iron oven that's got, well, stove. It's big and it's heavy. And there are several ovens and there are cooking plates at the top. And we've always been told, or I'd always been told, that this oven, this stove is always on. Actually, AGA US says, no, it's not always on. And one of my Essential Vegan Desserts students was actually a demonstrator. She's in Scotland for AGA, and she met Mary Berry, who was also a demonstrator for AGA. So if anyone's a fan of the Great Baking, I can't say that right now, Great British Baking Show, you're going to know. And she did amazing things with it. Kathy Gold, Chef Kathy Gold, who is my friend and neighbor and colleague, and did a wonderful live event with me on vanilla. You might want to go in and watch that or listen to it. Had an aga, or maybe two, in her cooking school in Haddonfield, New Jersey, called In the Kitchen Cooking School, and really, really liked it. I'll tell you, at the Natural Gourmet, they decided to move this aga out and get more, get some convection ovens and other kind of thing. And they really had a hard time. You need a good sturdy floor for an aga. So it looks like I've answered all the questions, had an opportunity to read all the questions. I want to thank you again. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Grab the documents that are right on the page. Feel free. Oh, great. Patrick, thank you. Patrick put Kathy Gold's vanilla event link to it so you can grab it. The live events library has so much good information. So I suggest you go and have a look and a listen. Some of them are now podcasts. And I will look forward to seeing you next May in my new kitchen with some bakes from my new oven, my GE Cafe oven. There's one thing I want to say before I sign off, and that is I chose to get an electric, or maybe I already said this, radiant cooktop, not an induction cooktop. And the reason was, there were two reasons. One, because I have some pots and pans that I love, and they're old and they're not induction ready. So how you know your pot or pan is not induction ready, you put a magnet on the bottom, and if the magnet sticks, it's induction ready. I didn't want to get rid of that, and I also did not want to put in a dedicated line for my oven. So I got really used to the radiant top, the electric oven, and I like it very much. Thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of the day or evening, and please join me in May.